Welcome to LaunchPad, the Jamf admin meetup. Thank you everyone for coming. If this is your first LaunchPad meetup hosted by Rocketman, welcome. We're super excited to have you. If this is your 50th meetup, we're still super excited to have you. Thank you for coming back. We've got a really exciting meetup this month. We have Michael Levenick from Jamf, the creator of the MUT tool. So Michael developed the MUT tool, which I think a lot of us have used, seen. Um, Interesting thing about Michael, he's been at Jamf for over 10 years, which is crazy. There's not a whole lot of those. Mike is the quality and safety engineer specializing on the AI side of things over at Jamf. So keeping the robots calm and from taking over. Very important job. With that, Michael, I don't want to steal any more of your thunder. I will kick it over to you, but thank you for joining us today.
I don't have a lot of thunder to steal, so it's all good. Um, yeah, as Eric said, my name is Michael Levenick, and I wrote the MUT, and this presentation is about how now it's easier than ever. This is sort of part three of a three-part saga. I did a presentation at the Hopkins Spring Tech thing a number of years ago, called I Wrote the MUT and You Can Too, which was really just about, my struggles in creating the MUT and how I feel that really anybody could make a tool like this if they sat down and did it. And then I did a JNUC presentation called I Wrote the MUT and You Should Too, which was more of a call to action and this idea that y'all have a lot of ideas that I don't have. Y'all have a lot of, um, you know, pains that I don't feel. And those pains and those ideas can be filled by tools like Mutt. And really, you should get out there and do that because it's the power of Jamf and it makes the whole community better. So now this is I wrote the Mutt, and now it's easier than ever because I firmly believe that in 2025 here, if somebody wants to do something like this, the resources that we have at our disposal have never been better. And we're going to talk about some of that today. So we'll talk a little bit about who I am, who I'm not. We're going to do a little bit of that brief history of the MUT again, just because I think it's good to sort of look at some of the struggles that I have, and I sort of lay myself bare in that part of the presentation. My journey in creating the MUT was not terribly glamorous, and I think shining some light on that can also help be a bit of a motivator for others who may want to do similar. We're then going to transition to looking at some of the tools at your disposal, API documentations, tutorials, and AI assistance. We're going to do a bit of vibe coding live. If you've ever heard of vibe coding, it's basically somebody using AI assistance to create something. And this is what I would call educated vibe coding because it's not somebody who has no idea what they're doing. Like we have some experience with these things, we have documentation that we're leveraging, we have tutorials that we're leveraging, and we're putting an AI assistant into that mix to help us out. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So, who is Michael Levenick? Father of two, Renee and Ruby, my wife Kelsey there in the background. Lover of all things sci-fi and fantasy, books, video games, TTRPG, D&D, all of that kind of stuff. I consider myself to be a tinkerer and a maker, 3D printer, Arduino projects, anything that involves a soldering iron, I love to do. I'm a private pilot with my PPL and IFR certifications. And I am the quality and safety engineer for AI products at Jamf. So I'm the one that tries to stop the robots from telling you to eat rocks to keep your Jamf Pro server online. And I am the creator of the MUT. You might have heard of it. I am not a software engineer. I'm not formally trained in software engineering. I'm not current on my medical for my PPL, and I'm not able to come up with any more clever bullet points for this slide. I did put a couple of asterisks on those first two because when I first created the MUT and through most of this journey, I was not a software engineer and I had no formal training in software engineering. Um, Last year, I did go back to school a bit for some programming stuff. I don't have a bachelor's still, but I've taken a couple classes now and I have held a position with software engineer in the title, so it's a little bit, but still, I've been at Jamf 10 years, and for 9 of those years, all of those things are true. And I just want to really draw emphasis to that. Like, I was a management major, and this is my journey. As I mentioned, I have no formal programming training, but when I first started at Jamf, my manager, Ian Hansen, was like, hey, take a look at the Jamf Pro API, do some scripting. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I referenced copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, trying stuff until it works, changing stuff and seeing what happens, and then Googling the error message. And really, frankly, just fumbled my way through creating a bunch of these scripts and things like that. But I realized pretty rapidly that there was a whole world of possibility here. Um, Lots and lots of things that could be done. And my journey throughout all of this has really been this comic incarnate. I don't know if any of you have ever had much experience in learning programming stuff, but it feels like you're just constantly running into roadblocks, banging your head against the issue for a while until it goes away, and then suddenly, there's a new and exciting roadblock to stop you in bespoke ways. And that's really what this was. And there were just constant issues and figuring those things out. But I've had conversations with programmers, and it seems that I wasn't alone in this. But I think it's important, again, to call out because folks who are trying something like this may find that to be their experience and they may think they're alone. But I promise you, you're not. So this giant folder of scripts was really MUT. By the time I became sort of the scripting guru in Jamf support, folks would come to me for scripts and they'd be like, "Hey, I need to update, sites on mobile devices by ID, or I need to update usernames on computers by serial number." And I just had this gigantic folder of scripts. Um, and you can see that, whoops. You can see that most of these scripts are really just modifying different things by different identifiers. And the scripts themselves are almost identical with just slightly different XML on one of the lines for the things that they were updating and then injecting variables into those. So I was like, well, this is a mess and there's got to be a better way. And so I created the mass update.sh script, which was sort of an attempt at a rudimentary UI using Bash. Tons of echoes and hyphens and plus signs, and the end user would press 1 to update iOS devices and press 2 to update OS 10 devices, or Mac OS as they're now called. Um, and so this was sort of the interface of what I would call proto-MUT. It was the mass update script, but it wasn't a great user experience. And I decided I wanted to learn a real programming language. And one of my friends, Alex, nicknamed Fancy, suggested that I learn Swift. So he sat me down and taught me some Swift stuff, basically just, the rudimentary how to lay out an interface. And I created the Fancy Update tool, which I nicknamed after his nickname. And this was sort of MUT pre-MUT. But there was a ton of learning that happened here, really just like the fundamentals of Swift and how it worked and all of that. But these early versions of MUT were literally just calling the curl binary on the back end. I wasn't using any native Swift networking whatsoever. I really don't recommend that you do that. It was not a great way to go about this, but it worked, and that was really cool. Version 2 got the ability to actually enforce mobile device names, which was a huge boon for admins. I think that was probably like the most commonly used feature, especially for education customers. They would just bulk rename these iPads like every fall when new students would come in. Um, and that was really, really useful. But I had wanted to add some sort of user output. Admins found it really frustrating at times not knowing what was happening in a given run. And the interface was starting to feel kind of cluttered with all sorts of different drop downs and buttons and things. But I wanted to avoid, adding new features. I wanted to avoid something like this. And unfortunately, in version 3, I took it perhaps a bit too far in the other direction. I have said that I'm not a programmer. I'm also not a UX designer. And I don't know if any of you remember version 3, but this is about what it looked like. And you would click through these buttons and it would give you this super simplified interface and sort of try to handhold people through walking through doing updates. But more importantly, it no longer used curl on the back end. I spent the time and learned native HTTP functionality and was really just trying to make it easier for my users. I also needed to learn how to pass information from one view to another, which was a huge hurdle, and opened up the ability to do this. And I got that info box in there that folks were hoping for that sort of showed what was happening with every line. And if there was a specific error code, it would display it. And people hated it, rightfully so. They called it handholdy, they called it childish. They were all correct. Um, but I was sort of at a loss and I felt really defeated. I didn't know what to do because I knew that this app had a bunch of functionality that people needed to have. Like I needed MUT to stop using curl on the back end, and I needed this info box, but I didn't know how to fix the UI problem. So this was where I landed, and I didn't love it, but it was fine. I made the window quite a bit bigger. That opened up a lot of possibility. Um, and it kept all of those same backend improvements. I basically just threw the authentication window up at the top and put the big info box at the bottom. But having that credential stuff on the same window had a couple of problems. Namely, there was no sort of validation of the credentials prior to submitting an update run. So if you put in bad credentials and you started a run, it would just hammer your Jamf Pro API with invalid credentials over and over and over. Um, Not a great thing to be doing. So I just took the top half of the app and split it off to the side, and that was version 4. In addition to that, I was able to clean up the interface a little more because I started making some logical determinations on what identifier you were using. If it saw letters in the identifier, it assumed it was a serial number. If it didn't, it assumed it was an ID. And then I spent a lot of time actually looking at other apps and seeing what their login windows look like. I think Instagram actually was the one that inspired me with this login window. It was modeled very closely off of Instagram and also Spotify and the way that they handled authentication. So yeah, that was version 4. He got a set of glasses because he was smarter now with those logical determinations, and everybody knows that glasses make people smarter. So yeah. Version 4 was a ground up rewrite in a lot of ways. A lot of things were fixed and worked better, but that also led to a lot of new and exciting bugs. There's a direct correlation between code written and bugs introduced. And there was a lot of code written in version 4, a lot of bugs, but by the time I squashed them all, I think version 4.2.1 sat for like a couple years because it just did everything that people needed it to do, and worked fairly well. But I kept getting this ask over and over and over like, hey, I want to update multiple attributes at the same time. It was the main thing that people wanted from MUT that it didn't do. And I, frankly, was terrified of it because I had this fear that somebody would malform their CSV and upload their asset tags to the username field. And messing with that username field was sort of the worst case scenario in my mind because a lot of folks, especially in schools and things like that, have groups by users. And if you nuke the username field, it could cause devices to fall out of those groups. And then they would lose their app scope. And if apps get pulled off of mobile devices, you lose all of the app data. And I just had this like nightmare scenario in my mind of somebody nuking all of their data with MUT. And I was terrified of it. But, it felt like a solvable problem. So in MUT version 5, I kind of came full circle because my buddy Ben Whitus hit me up and he was like, hey, I kind of want to learn like a real programming language. And I was like, how about Swift? And I gave him really the same rundown that Fancy had given me and asked him if he wanted to help out with MUT. And he agreed. We started working as sort of a two-person development team. We worked in 2-week sprints. We got together and handed tickets around and things like that. We started using Git more as a collaborative tool instead of just version control. And this interface on the right-hand side is what opened up the possibility for, multiple attribute updates at the same time. Um, we also had this idea that we really wanted to support the ability to update pre-stage scopes. We had heard that this was coming in the new version of Jamf Pro, and it was out in the beta, and we were like, awesome, we're going to support the ability to update pre-stage scopes. Everybody wants that. Let's do it. We shot for same day support on that and we nailed it. We were a few days early. And I made a Jamf Nation post being like, hey, download the MUT version 5 beta. You can update your pre-stage scopes with it now. And I got a ping from Jamf Legal being like, hey, we haven't announced that the ability to update pre-stage scopes is in the API yet. You need to take your post down. You are violating NDA. And that was a little bit scary. So it just turned out that this thing was in beta. I had the beta, didn't realize that folks who are in the beta have signed an NDA. Don't recommend those types of conversations. It wasn't a lot of fun. It wasn't a huge deal, but yeah, some learning happened there as well. Finally, he got sunglasses because version 5 was the first version that had like true dark mode support following the system schema and all of that kind of stuff. Version 6 got some new fields, some refactoring. It's mostly behind the scenes, boring authentication stuff that is kind of invisible to the end user. Um, and around this time is also when Jamf became the owner of MUT. So yeah, Jamf is the owner of MUT now, which had some learning that went along with it. I had to find a PO to approve my releases, and I had to like build pipelines and all of that kind of stuff. Which has slowed down development quite a bit, along with the fact that it's a little bit grayer now, like when I should work on it, and when I shouldn't. But yeah, future of Mutt, I think I need to update it to support the new authentication methods. It really should be client ID and client secret now for the API. Um, I'd really like to do away with these annoying templates. You have to like download a template and it has to be formatted exactly. And it's one of the biggest frustrations I think that users have is that, their template is malformed and Mutt just refuses to accept it, which was sort of my compromise on that, my fear of updating the wrong field. Your template has to be exact. The columns have to be exactly what I expect, or it just won't take it. And as was mentioned, the computer's endpoint, which is the endpoint that Mutt does all of its work on, basically, with the exception of groups and pre-stages, and I think that's about it. Everything else is on that computer's endpoint, and it's going away. So Mutt needs to be updated to use the JPAPI. I think, all of that is sufficient to require sort of another ground-up rewrite that I'm not really looking forward to. So I'm not quite sure what the future of Mutt is going to look like, but it will hopefully include those things. So, yeah, that's the journey of creating Mutt. If anybody wanted to create a similar tool, some resources at your disposal, the Jamf developer portal, developer.jamf.com, has a ton of really excellent resources. You can click in and see all sorts of examples in shell script, in Swift, in Ruby, and Python for all of these different API calls, really explicit information about different responses that you might receive, what those responses mean. You can click into the recipes and see sort of examples of, this is the token stuff, and there's an example of getting a token, checking the token, invalidating it, usage information. It's really excellent. If anybody is interested in learning Swift UI, Apple has an incredible tutorial. It's honestly one of the best tutorials I think that I've ever seen. No surprise coming from Apple. But if you Google, Apple Swift UI tutorial, you should be able to find this. And I think there should be a link to it in the resources as well. But they give you some project files that you can download. So all of the images and things that they use are available. So you can just download them and then you can just follow along. And they show you exactly what to click and where to click and how to click and what to type and the expected result that you should find from taking those steps. And it really is going to walk you through the whole thing. So Swift UI is sort of the new method of building these interfaces in Swift, and it will make a lot of decisions for you about, how much space to put in places. You can customize all of it, but it tries to take a lot of that and simplify it as much as possible. Um, and it's really, really good. I will show in just a minute an app that I built in Swift UI. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of Stupid Groups, is another app that I created. that basically takes a smart group and will convert it either to a static group or an advanced search. And stupid groups has been mostly rewritten in Swift UI. And so, yeah, we'll take a look at that in just a minute here. And then the last thing I want to talk about a little bit is just AI assistance. I know AI is a super divisive topic, um, but I think if you're interested in learning something like this, um, AI is not to the point where you can just tell it, if you don't have any idea what you're doing, I don't think you could just tell it to create something and it could do it all on its own. But if you're the type of person who's used to Googling the error message and copying and pasting from Stack Overflow and searching those types of sources, I think it can be an incredibly powerful tool that you can leverage. And take a quick moment to plug the product that I work on. I noticed a couple of my teammates in here as well. Thanks for joining. Um, but the product that we work on is the Jamf AI Assistant. So this is built off of Anthropic's Claude model, as opposed to like OpenAI and ChatGPT and things like that. And it is a RAG tool. If you're not familiar with RAG, it stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Effectively, you type a question and it is going to search. And it's going to search this big data set and it will find information, pull that in, and then summarize it and use that to sort of ground its answer as best it can in what it knows to be the truth. And that data source that we have is a bunch of Jamf product documentation. It's a bunch of anonymized like case information from solution provided cases, internal knowledge base articles, even the transcripts from like JNUC presentations and things like that are in there. So lots of like basically all of the sources that you might go to try to find an answer and have to manually search, it will search for you and then try to summarize that information. And if you don't trust an AI to summarize for you, you can also click the newspaper icon after you ask it a question and you can see the sources and you can click into them and you can read for yourself. And it's effectively just the best search engine for searching Jamf resources. It is currently available globally in open beta, so anybody on this call can get access to it. You'll find it in Jamf account. You'll need one of your organization, like owner, administrator, whatever the term is, to go in there and approve it because it is opt-in, disabled by default. We know that in this world of AI assistants sort of being everywhere, and a lot of companies are using them, I think, not in the best way. We really wanted to make a product that is really just to improve those who want that improvement. We're not training off of data. It's opt-in. It's disabled by default. We tried really hard to respect as much of that privacy and all of that kind of stuff as we could because, again, we recognize that in 2025, that's a little bit rare and hopefully appreciated. So we're going to quick put this all together. And we're going to do a little bit of what the kids call vibe coding here really quick. Oh, here I can show you really quick though. This is stupid groups, and this is sort of an example of what you can do in Swift UI. So we've got a domain, client ID, and client secret. We can verify, and then this is effectively like a list of all the different groups. We can show whether or not to display static groups. We can sort by name or ID. We can do the same for mobile. And then, if I wanted to, I could click into make non-compliant and I could convert it to a static group and the API call should go. And if we refresh, we will see make non-compliant stupefied, which is a static group. So yeah, I don't know if or when this will be sort of released publicly, but this also might be similar to maybe what a MUT-esque app might look like in the future. It's a little bit uncertain, but I think Swift UI is great, and I think anybody who's looking to make a really clever tool can do so pretty quickly and easily. So if we have here in Xcode, we've got the Rocketman demo app, and this is just the default. There's nothing in here really. We're going to head out to Jamf account and go to the AI assistant. I just need to move some stuff around here a little bit. Make this a little bigger, and I'll say, hey, I'd like to make an app that uses the Jamf Pro API. Going to use client ID and client secret for authentication. can you help me make a rough draft login window? I'll need 3 boxes for URL, client ID, and secret. And I'd like to just get a token for now. We can display it in the console and also display any errors encountered in the console. Um, Here's some example, whoops, from the developer docs. And so I can give it the, let's come over here. I'm going to give it this bash example. And I'm going to give it also this Swift example. Did I tell it I want to make a Swift UI app for iOS? That's important information that it probably needs. Can you help me with what files need to be created and what their content is? Cool. So this is going to chug for just a minute. It's going to do that RAG lookup here because it's pulling information from the latest API documentation and things like that. I provided these examples just because sometimes I think it's good to point stuff in the right direction right off the bat if we can. But it does have access to the API docs and things like that as well. So it says we need to create an auth response.swift, an auth view model, and then it also gives us a login view, which is exactly what we'll need. We learned about views in our Swift UI tutorial that we definitely did. And then it also tells us that we're going to need to update the base app to point at that login view as opposed to the regular content view. We can see the sources that got pulled in here. So this is interesting stuff. If you wanted to do some further reading, you could click into those. But let's just, we're doing this live. I'm really, I have done this a few times and it worked every time for me, but we'll see. This is the login view.swift. Login view.swift. We have the, what is that? Auth view model.swift. And we have the actual auth response. And then the last thing that it wanted us to do was actually update the app. We're not going to point to the content view. We're going to point to that new login view that we just created. And let me get my credentials here. Are you nervous? I'm nervous. It's going to be fine. Hey, look at that. We got a token. So yeah, this is real like in a minute and a half of work, we can build out something really cool. And again, combining this, I don't recommend that with no knowledge of these things that you set out to do this using nothing but an AI assistant. I'm on an AI team and I just don't think we're quite there yet. Um, but combining it with documentation, combining it with tutorials, combining it with resources like Stack Overflow and things like that, um, I think you can build some really cool stuff, and I think you should.
Beautiful. Well, it's about the time that we have, so we might as well start wrapping up. Michael, thank you so much. It was a fantastic presentation. We appreciate your time, the hard work that you're putting in
Yeah,
on MUT and at Jamf. So thank you. And then also a huge thank you to everyone who joined this meetup this month. You know, without you guys, the meetup doesn't happen. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll get the invites out for next month's meetup. I believe it's on Friday, May 2nd. And it looks like that is with Kevin White and Superman 5.0. So that's a super exciting one. Um, Thank you everyone for joining. Follow up with us if you have any questions about anything Jamf related. Follow up with Michael if you have any questions, anything MUT related or us, and we'll get you in contact. It sounds like we can just follow up with Jamf if you have any MUT related questions and they'll sort that out.
Yeah, just
Jamf
open a
support will
support
now
call.
answer MUT questions. You can ask the Jamf AI assistant about MUT, and it'll do its best to answer them, which is like a wild world to be living in.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a full circle for you. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, if I ask it to build the MUT for me, will it just give me the source code?
It's gonna try really hard, and you're gonna get a result. It will be a result. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you for joining us today. We have new episodes on the first Friday of every month. If you'd like to join our session live, visit the link in the description to get on our mailing list. And if you're looking to get the most out of your Jamf server, visit rocketman.tech to set up a meeting with one of our Jamf experts. That's rocketman.tech.